All right, we're here at Outfront Motorsports in Buena Park. If you don't know Outfront, they're one of my favorite shops to come to. They've got tons of great parts, especially if you're a Subaru and outdoors vehicle type guy. They've got an amazing bunch of buggies and Jeeps and stuff they got. I see you building in the back. But one of the main reasons we're here today is I came to Outfront Motorsports to do my own Subaru swap into my '71 Beetle. Jeremy and Jhon here are in the know when it comes to exactly what's needed, what parts we need, how much you should spend on the majority of your parts, you know, some technical know-how, what kind of motors you should look for, what kind of motors you should stay away from. So we're going to look at some of the products that you're going to definitely need to get your car up and running if you're going to do the swap. So Jhon here is the owner?
I'm the owner, yes.
Owner of Outfront here. So how long have you guys been doing the whole swap and Subaru
Well,
stuff?
I got started in the year 2000 where I did my first Subaru in a sand rail, and that's what got me enthused with working with the Subaru engine. I own a auto repair shop also, and so this was complementary to me working with Subarus in the off-road industry.
Nice. So now, I specifically looking at doing the Beetle, but obviously you can do this in Vanagons and buses and things of that nature. So I guess the first question for me is, what are the major benefits versus building like a large Volkswagen motor versus going with the Subaru motor?
Sure. Well, first I'd like to make a disclaimer that these parts are not to be used in emission compliant vehicles. That if your car was outside of those realms, then maybe, but we do not supply any emission vehicle friendly components. As far as what would be the advantages over a VW is that a typical VW motor starts off in the 60 to 80 horsepower range, and Subarus start off in the 140 horsepower range. So right off the bat, you're literally doubling your horsepower, in some cases maybe even tripling the horsepower by installing a Subaru into your VW powered vehicle.
Yeah, I think originally my Beetle had something like 46 horsepower
Yes,
or something like that.
The other problems that we have with the VW would be is that you have consistent oil leaks, you have carburation, so you have pilot jets to deal with. By the time you're done, if you were to try to build a 200 horsepower VW power that was reliable, you couldn't do it, and it would still cost you over $10,000 to build the engine. So if you're comparing horsepower per dollar, the Subaru outshines the VW in any stretch of the imagination.
Nice. Yeah, I totally get it. And I've been loving my Beetle. It's like night and day. It's just so, it's almost crazy, dangerous, and I just have the basic 2.2. Like, right. I had to put like the tire in the front just to keep the weight down in the front. Otherwise, it just gets so light and ridiculous.
Well, maybe I might add here at this point that in 1990, the Subaru came out with the EJ series platform, and the EJ series motor started in 1990, and they range from 1.6 liter, 1.8, 2.0 turbos, 2.2 liters, 2.2 turbos, and 2.5s, and they're all on the same EJ platform, meaning that they all use the same oil pan, they all use the same adapter plate, they mostly use the same exhaust system, so many parts are interchangeable through the sizes. But the most common motors out there for swaps would be the early model 2.2, like what you have, small valve cover, 3 bolts across each valve cover, or the other common one would be a 2.5 single overhead cam motor. Both of those are inherently advantageous to put in a VW powered motor.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, so let's get into it. So let's say I find like some of the more common vehicles, like you said, the 2.2 and the 2.5. Let's start with the must-haves in order to get your car up and running. So I buy the motor, I'm taking out my Beetle motor. What do I need to actually mount the motor onto the, let's say we're going with the stock Subaru,
Sure.
the stock Volkswagen transmission?
If you bought a Subaru motor, the first two things that you would want to be buying would be the adapter plate and the oil pan. Those are the first two items. The adapter plate allows the Subaru motor to be bolted up to any VW transmission and a transaxle, and then the oil pan, the stock Subaru oil pan, is very deep and it sits very low in the car. It would hang down out of the car maybe 5 or 6 inches, and so we modify, well, the Subaru hangs down more than the VW in the first place, and then the oil pan's even deeper, which adds to the problem. So we make shortened oil pans which allow the bottom to be further away from the ground. Here's an example of one of our shortened oil pans. We basically work with and start with a stock Subaru oil pan This particular specimen has a turbo drain back for a turbo application. We can configure these multiple ways. This particular pan, we added an extra kick out that holds about another quart. A little bit more money, but we can configure. We have dual kick out oil pans, single kick out oil pans. But anyways, that's one of the main things you need is the oil pan and then the adapter kits. The adapter kits, there's several manufacturers of adapter kits, both Kennedy, KEP, Kennedy Engineered Products, as well as we manufacture Flywheels and adapter kits also. The Kennedy one, the advantage of Kennedy is, we sell, when it's an 8-inch adapter kit, we sell the Kennedy product. The 8-inch adapter would be used more for Type 1 VW transmissions, maybe the 002 bus transmission. Once you get to the 091 bus tranny or bigger, like maybe a Mendiola, we would generally recommend you're going with more horsepower, so you would go with a 9-inch flywheel. Here's a comparison of the two. Kennedy Engineered Products, KEP, and this is the Outfront Motorsports adapter plate. Literally, they're the same.
Now it looks like here you have some more grooves, or maybe it's just the way you machined it. It seems
yeah, ours is just machined differently than, and it maybe looks a little bit more pretty. The outside edge is maybe a little bit smooth. It doesn't affect any of the performance issue at all. But these two plates are literally interchangeable. Both of them bolt to the EJ series motor, and both will bolt to the VW transmission. The only thing that changes is the stud length, depending on which transmission you use.
And it's pretty, I'm guessing it's pretty straightforward. So let's say if a beginner got their hands on it, they knew a little bit, let's say about, mechanics, and they wanted to bolt it right up. Is there any special tool that we would need to put these on?
No special tools, but I would suggest that when you are starting doing the mock-up that you would only put the adapter plate on, that you would not even bother with the flywheel. And you could be installing and removing and installing multiple times the motor with just the adapter plate, just for fitment purposes. By that point, you could take a look at how deep your oil pan is and whether you want to put a shortened oil pan on, what your exhaust system is going to look like based on where it is. We also make adapter kits for Vanagons. Specifically, we make a special extra heavy flywheel. The Vanagon, when you can use a 9-inch flywheel compared to the 8-inch flywheel, the clutch disc surface area is larger. But if you look at the thickness of the flywheel, this flywheel is substantially heavier than the KEP flywheel. Most Vanagon enthusiasts like the heavy flywheel because it helps rotating mass to just stay moving when they're letting the clutch out on a 4,000-pound vehicle. You just want some mass in there, and so we're known for our extra heavy flywheel in the Vanagon application.
So these are designed and built by you in-house?
This flywheel is built by us. This is a Kennedy product here.
Okay.
Yeah, so we sell both of them. The other plug I might put in for both Kennedy and Outfront adapter plates is that we always have them in stock the day you order them. If you were to call Kennedy today, they might tell you it's a 3-week wait for the adapter plate. We sell them for the same price, and we always have them in stock.
Now, when I purchased my set, I got the Outfront set. I got the heavier clutch as well. Now, do you recommend going with a heavier clutch, or can somebody stick with the Volkswagen clutch? Or?
Well, when you say heavier, you meant more pressure, not that they actually weigh more.
Yeah.
So Kennedy, all my clutch components come from Kennedy, KEP. They have stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 in both 8-inch and in 9-inch. And it all depends on the torque that your motor can produce. That is what you have to exceed, the amount of torque that your motor can produce. And what comes into play is the clutch disc and the material that is on the clutch disc, whether it's an organic material like a typical rag disc, or a sintered iron disc, or any other composite 6-puck disc, those type of things. Clearly a 6-puck would not be conducive to street use or for lightly slipping. It's more of an off or on, so it's really used for off-road.
It seems pretty aggressive. Like I didn't get like your heaviest one. I think I got like the one before your heaviest one. It seems a lot more aggressive.
But the pressure is only rated based off of the engine torque. So if you have a 2.2 that's making 150 foot-pounds of torque, you only need to exceed that torque requirement based on your disc material and the pressure plate pressure.
Oh, okay. So now I noticed with the adapters, so specifically the adapters are designed so that you can bolt it directly onto the Volkswagen transmission, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So let's say in the future, I decided to try this like the Subi Gears transmission, you know, the reverse stroke transmission.
Sure.
Would I still use the same like flywheel, or would I have to?
No, you would actually then, this would be void then, because
Okay.
what happens is the Subaru motor used to bolt to the Subaru tranny, so the advantage of that is that you would not have to buy the adapter. So you could save $500 range by going with the Subi Gears, but the jury's still out as far as I'm concerned on the Subi Gear application, because what you're not hearing is that the application or the installation of that tranny could trigger lots of different things. Motor mounts, CV joints, of how they mount on, maybe a new shifter, and by the time you get done with these other items, now I have not installed one, so I don't know, but just having done this type of work in the past, installing one of these transmissions could trigger multiple other expenses and might outweigh the fact of just having the standard VW powered transmission reinforced. It all fits, the CV joints, the CV boots clear, the tranny mounts in there, the shifter works. There's a lot to be said about the stock transmission and using this.
Now, I know with, especially, I don't know if it translates the same way, but I know with like some applications when they want to do like sports and stuff like that, they try to go, I don't think like with a lighter flywheel or something like that. Like, or let's say you know, obviously these are great for your daily drivers.
Right.
You know, you're getting that extra power. Now, is there an option if I wanted to do more of like a track car? Yeah,
not very many people are going with lighter flywheels these days. Well, this adapter kit is really for a VW base. It's not Subaru based. So a track car would have a Subaru transmission, would have a Subaru flywheel, and so this doesn't even come into play. Even if we had built a 600 horsepower motor, we generally would not be lightening the flywheel for any reason, not unless it's absolutely for severe competition.
Oh, okay. Now, with the oil pan here, does it drastically change the amount of oil that I have to put in the motor? Or?
Yeah, so that's a common question. So because we're lowering the oil, we're shortening the oil pan and bringing the bottom up, we're actually not telling you to use less oil. We want to use the same quantity of oil, but this oil level will now be closer to the crankshaft. It's still far away from the crankshaft, so no issue about beating or oil beating or anything like that of the crankshaft sitting in oil. But we do, in order for you to do that, you have to then look at your dipstick and readjust your dipstick. What you would want to do is simply put in 4.5 quarts of oil and then start the car up, get the oil filter full, and then actually remark your dipstick. Typically that might raise the level on the dipstick by 1 to 1.5 inches up on the dipstick, but no because we use these in off-road, that we have modified the pickup screen so that if the pan was to be smashed at the bottom and be dented in, that the pickup actually rises with the pan bottom, so that we won't starve for oil, because in the sand or the dirt you could smash the bottom of the pan. We might mention and show that the oil pan is made out of a 3/16 lower plate, so it's very strong on the bottom. We have a drain plug at the very bottom of the oil pan so that all of the oil comes out during an oil change.
All right. So now I see we have a very little adapters and plugs here. I know the next big question I get all the time is exactly how did you hook up the throttle cable from the Volkswagen to the Subaru itself? Now, I know with myself, I got the adapters you have here, and you actually have to take off the like 2 or 3 connections that are on the throttle body and put this one on. So
there's many ways to skin that cat. Basically, you could use the stock bell crank, which are the round, half moon kind of devices that you would put a little barrel nut on, and you run a normal throttle cable. We've made some simple aluminum brackets that you can strip down and clean up the throttle body and only apply this lever on here. And then we have a small, basically a ball socket assembly that can be mounted in any one of 7 positions, and then you could simply put your throttle cable into here, tighten it down, and it makes for really quick disconnect. If this was hooked onto your engine, you simply pull back on the lever and you can disconnect your throttle for easy engine installation or removal, and you can simply put it back on.
Okay.
Makes it nice and easy. We have lots of little gadgets. We have little block off plates for components that you might want to strip off. We have turbo oil feed ports that come to a -3. We have fuel line fittings to convert some fuel lines to AN fittings. Maybe a fitting that can use your stock pressure regulator on a billet fuel rail later. But we have hundreds of small little components like that. So when you are doing your Subaru project, we are the #1 place you should call.
Indeed.
And ask the question, because we're super helpful on the phone to try to resolve your problems and crossroads that you're coming to.
Oh yeah, Jeremy and Jhon have helped me in tons, especially when it comes to, just like little connections. When I think of how many times I was going through and I was just like, I have no idea where this goes.
Sure.
And you guys have helped me out. All right, so let's say...
Well, one other thing. There are even other things like what some people don't recognize is that on some motors the intake manifolds are interchangeable. They can be turned around. The alternator can be put in different locations. The lower water line, there's 2 different styles of water pumps that would allow the water neck to be put in different locations or point in different ways. So don't constrict yourself to saying, my motor came with that water pump, this is what I have to work around. If you call us and talk to us, or we could send you pictures, you could send us pictures and we can reply and say this would be the best water pump or water thermostat inlet for you to make your project happen.
Yeah, it's amazing. The biggest problem I've had was, especially with smaller projects like bugs and things like that, is there's a huge support for the Vanagon and bus community. But when it comes to Beetles, it's so hard because the applications can be so different.
Right.
Your technical know-how can be different. So let's say I want to do my Beetle, or let's start with just the Beetle. I want to do my Beetle, and I want to start off by mounting the motor to the car. What can I be looking at just for parts? Obviously, when it comes to the entire build, it varies on your skill set, whether you're taking it to a shop to get done, those kind of things.
Sure.
What can I be looking coming out of pocket for the basic parts that I would need to get started? Let's say, your clutch, maybe a heavier clutch, your flywheel, your adapter plate, things that have to go on the car to make it run.
Sure. So there are 3 main components. We're showing you 2 of them. One would be the adapter plate and obviously the associated clutch components that go along here. The adapter plate, the cheapest one we have is the Kennedy. The less expensive one we have is the Kennedy Engineered Products at $480. By the time you add a clutch disc and a pressure plate, you'd be somewhere hovering in the $700 range for that setup. Then you have your oil pan. Your oil pan can range from as low as $270 all the way up to $470 with turbo drains and turbo returns and double kickouts, but $270. So right there you can see you have about $1,000 invested. The next biggest hurdle, and the biggest hurdle of them all, besides the engine, whether you're doing something to your stock engine, using it stock or rebuilding it, would be the engine management system.
Oh yeah.
So the engine management system can come in lots of different flavors. We're probably the most expensive one because ours is fully aftermarket. That's why I'm not smog compliant in this area. But there's advantages and disadvantages. The only disadvantage of our system would be the cost and the fact that we don't run typically we don't run an idle speed control motor, and we don't run an O2 sensor. The reason why is that we're trying to keep it simple. We're trying to make it just the meat and potatoes. We want the bare minimum that's required to make the motor run and perform flawlessly. On top of our system, which is typically in the $1,400 to $1,500 range, that's computer, wire harness, and basic programming. Besides that, you're able to put the air filter right onto the throttle body, so there's no mass air sensor used. In your application, you use the stock ECU, which if you can find one and you get it, then you have to send it out, and you might pay $500 to $900 for modification of your stock ECU. So some advantage of that system is it's cheaper. It can use the stock idle speed control motor. It can use the oxygen sensor. It might get maybe a little bit better gas mileage, maybe be a little bit more smooth as far as cold morning startups, that type of thing. But performance is limited because you're not able to tune this ECU quite the way you can with our aftermarket ECU. So our aftermarket ECU is kind of, our goal is maximum performance, simplicity, those type of things, where your system would be maybe the most drivability, maybe best gas mileage, maybe a little bit cheaper, but it is more complex. The mass airflow sensor, the idle speed control has to sit on there. When the idle speed control motor has to stay on the intake manifold, then it restricts you to maybe not turning your intake around, or it hits your alternator, or a whole bunch of different other things. So ours, again, is coming from an off-road background, going towards a street use, if you will. Now, some of the things that our motors are installed into, we've had them in mud boats, some type of boats that operate. We've had them in kit cars like Porsche replica cars, Myers Manx, Beetles, Vanagons, and then obviously dune buggies. And there are some enthusiasts who even do airplane, Subaru and airplane, but we don't get involved with that's experimental stuff, and we don't get involved with Subarus and airplanes.
Now, I know obviously another common question I got when I told people I got all my stuff from Outfront was, how do you order the stuff if you don't live in California? Like, I was lucky because they're literally like 30 minutes from me. Like, I was doing tons of research, and I was like, oh my God, thank God these guys are so close, because I know it's going to be something I'm going to blow up, and I'm not going to be able to find anyone to help me out. So I've always recommended, but I get the same question. I'm like, I went to the site, how do I order it? Or
So our site is under construction. We used to have really an off-road site that was more for dune buggies, off-road kit cars, that kind of thing. And then we are catering a little bit more towards the street scene right now as far as actual street cars. And so a typical customer going to our website could find a link at the bottom that says off-road and go to that link and maybe see lots of pictures. But what we're most famous for is our customer support. If you were to ask about a question, we could have you either send us some pictures, or we will send you pictures of something that we might have available. So the easiest way, again, we don't really have tons of part numbers for our parts. It's more like, oh, I need this or I need that, and we know exactly what you need. Give us a picture and we'll send out what you need. So ordering with us is really simple. We really strive to have all our parts in stock at all times to make your project go fast and smooth.
So now, obviously, one of the first things that I would always recommend is finding a good donor car, but obviously in some places that can be pretty hard. You also build Subaru motors, you refurbish, you rebuild, you have, sport builds. So let's say, I have my Beetle or my Vanagon, and I do want a more professionally built motor. I want it to know that I'm not going to have any head issues. Because what would I be looking at starting for a good motor?
Well, that brings up interesting questions. So some people do take that chance and they roll the dice on the roulette table, and as far as thinking that maybe the motor I'm buying is going to last. It may last 1 week, it might last 1 month, it might last 10 years. You just don't know. So in the past, we used to buy a whole bunch of the JDM motors, used motors, but maybe every 10th motor we were having a failure, either rod bearing or head gasket or a noise or this type of thing. And we got tired of that, but we just can't run a business that way. So in our business, we typically rebuild all of our engine packages. So when we sell an engine package, it's not only has all these components, it's also rebuilt. If you were to bring me your motor from your car and say, I need this motor rebuilt, you could be seen, depending on the condition you give it to me and how stripped down it is, it could range from $1,500 to $3,000 in a heartbeat. That would be it's just like a street car. If you drive your street car and you have an engine rebuilt, it's going to cost $4,000 or $5,000. Well, that's including removal and installation of a street car. So a Subaru motor is not cheap. They are unique. Not every mechanic knows how to work on a Subaru. Just because they say I'm a mechanic doesn't mean they can work on a Subaru. There are little tricks of the trade, silicone in certain areas that make the job right. So understanding that, we typically rebuild all of our engines. We actually buy cores that are less than desirable, maybe that don't run, that have bad cranks, and because we know we're going to tear them all down and rebuild every one of them. But you can take the chance with a used donor car. If you hear it run, maybe it has 100,000 miles and you want to take a chance, by all means, you can do that.
All right. So, like I said, we're here at Outfront. These guys are masters of their craft. We've got amazing parts. If you're in Los Angeles, this is the spot to come to if you're thinking whether you have a Vanagon or any vehicle. I mean, when I think of all the other possible applications for a Subaru motor, it's just mind-boggling.
Yes. We're just 5 miles north of Disneyland.
Yeah. So, I want to thank Jhon again for coming, taking your time. And thanks again. I'll see you guys later.